Hello, good afternoon everybody, it's Jo Allsopp, Sable Studio Gallery. I have done quite a few of the video on demand so far for the SAA, and so you can see more of my work that way. But today I thought Motivational Monday, to keep you occupied, I was going to do something with pen and wash for you. So I'm going to explain what materials I'm going to be using, and then I'm going to paint a hare. So I've got this image here, of which I've done a long time ago, and I think it's quite apt for the time of year, so a spring hare. Just thought you might be interested in having a go. Okay, so starting with the materials that I'm going to be using, I've got the Clairefontaine watercolour paper, cold pressed, and I've got my 3 trusty brushes. I always advise people to use what they're comfortable with, but these are mine. They are squirrel, and I've got a mummy, daddy and baby. The only one that isn't squirrel out of those is of course this rigger here, which is a very, very fine, very small brush for some of the detail. Okay, so starting with a drawing, I'm going to be using a Staedtler Triplus fine liner, of which I like because, like many of the water-soluble pens, it will dissipate and you will lose some of the hardline images. So instead of using a pencil and rubbing out, it builds up your confidence because you're putting the pen on, of which you can't rub out. So it's getting you to be a little bit more creative, hand and eye coordination and none of the rubbing out. So it builds up your confidence, believe it or not. Then when you go back to pencil, you find pencil really easy because of course you can rub it out. But this one I find is so forgiving. The other thing about this pen I do like is the fact that a couple of colours come out of it as well. So whilst it's a black pen, it actually has some blue elements, sometimes purpley will come from the black, but then some yellowy touches as well. So a bit like my Parker ink, the Quink ink that I like to use a lot of, it's got other colours with it. I am also going to be adding some watercolour, as you can see on this very slight bit of pink on the nose and in the ears, so that's going to come in there as well. But first of all, I'm going to start with a pen outline. When everything's finished and dried, I'll dry with a hairdryer. I am then going to add a micron pen. This micron is a 005, very fine, which I'm going to find useful for doing the eyelashes, because obviously a water-soluble pen, you won't be able to get that kind of detail because it will kind of dissipate and move around. So we've got the micron pen to secure those bits of details at the end. But do ensure that the painting is fully dry before we do that. So I will have to give it a quick blast with the hairdryer. So you will have to excuse the noise. You will also find that I'm back to front. I am actually left-handed, and because I've never videoed myself this way before, and this is what we're having to do, I've not quite got the techno bit of brain in me yet. So I'm looking and researching and trying to get the best facility that I can from home. This is my home studio, so I'm lucky that I have a space where I can escape to and do my painting, of which I'm doing plenty of, and I hope you are as well. So let's get started. Okay, so you might see quite a bit at the back of me, but I'm going to start with the outline of the hare, and I'm going to put just scraggy pen marks and start with something that I can use as a unit to measure the rest of the image. So I tend to use things to help me get the measurements for the rest of the painting in. So once I've drawn the ear, for instance, I will look at that ear top to bottom, and I will use that to go into the head to check how far down I need to go. So if I've done a larger ear, then obviously I would go down further the page. So for instance, if that is massive like that, then I would have to use the big one to do it that way. Therefore you can get the bigger image. That's the easiest way to go, I think. To be fair, a lot of people do like to trace down, but I like to do it freehand and be creative and just let it go with the flow, really. As long as it looks like a hare is the main thing. So with that one ear in place, and I look again and I assess, I've got 1 unit, goes into the face again, 1 unit. So 1 ear fits top of the head to the bottom of the chops. So top of the head to the bottom of the chops. I'm going to put a little marker in there. Then I can look at the gap in between, look at the negative space that you have, look for shapes that you may see, a triangle, a V, anything that you can recognise is going to help you get the end result. So there's not much of a gap in between the ears. If it transpired that you'd drawn the ear and you had got much too wide a gap in between, you could rectify that. The way that you could rectify that would be to add another little bit of pen on the other side, even on the length as well, if you wanted to. But that in mind, if you add additional lines and you make it longer, that would mean that that would have to change also, because I'd added some on the top here to make them match. The ears are going to be the same size, so in that case it's fine to add some, but you must ensure that you change the other unit as well. So I'm going to drop that down to there, and then I'm going to continue with the hair and try and get as many scraggly lines in as I can. Okay, so this is just a bit of inspiration for you, something to do, quite a quick painting really. So just more of the shape of the hair, scraggy, and then I'm going to draw in the eyes. Okay, so they are quite close to the top of the head, close to the ear. There's a massive gap though in between the eyes. So again, you could use this for reference to suggest how many of those eye widths go in between his head. Okay, so you assess how tall that eye is, how many of those from top to bottom of the eye would fit into the ear, and work it out that way. Also, you can look at the eye and see that how many eye lengths go in to the rest of what you're painting, so that you get the proportions right. So one of those eyes fits into the ears so many times. So it's up to you to decide, because I don't know how big you've drawn your first unit. You could do it small, you could do it huge. So just use those as a rough guide. Okay, so going back to the hair is a bit wonky. It's hard to draw this way on, but we'll do our best. And I'm going to draw the eye in that other side, and then I'm going to leave a white area. So I'm going to mark out where's grey and where might be white, and then I shall be using a bit of wax candle to reserve some of those light areas. Right, okay, so we can get the nose in, the mouth, the chops I call it, chops, and the little chinny chin chin. Okay, so there we have a very, very rough sketch, which is all I want. I'm a loose painter, I love nature, and I think hares are beautiful. They've got the most gorgeous eyelashes. At this stage, to be fair, you could swap and use your micron pen, and that way you wouldn't have to wait for it to dry to get those details in. Plus, it's an ideal opportunity to use the permanent pen to avoid touching the wax. So if you use pens before the wax is probably a good idea, but sometimes I do use pen right at the end to just suggest little details that I may have missed along the way. So it's entirely up to you, but don't let your nibs touch the wax, okay? Because then it's going to ruin the nib. So we're going to use this pen here. In fact, we have various nib sizes, and this one's a bit thicker, but I'll just show you. For instance, I've got lots and lots of different ones. I've got 08, 04, I've got pin, and then I've got the very, very small 005 for really fine detail. So you can get these from the SAA. So we have got areas of which I want to put eyelashes, long eyelashes, because the other pen is going to dissipate, and so you'll ruin that little bit of detail that you're after. So I'm going to put long eyelashes on. Underneath as well, they have lots of hair coming out, eyelashes, little whiskers coming out all over the place. If you study a photograph of a hare, or you ever get the joy to get close to one, you will notice that there aren't just the whiskers around the cheeks, they've got them everywhere. Okay, so we've got some there at the top of the eye, bottom of the eye. We've got little dots and touches around the nose, little bits of fur that we can scruff in. scraggy scrags. And then we can do the huge whiskers that they have. Don't do them in the same direction. And if you struggle going the opposite way, may I suggest you turn your paper upside down so that you find it easier. We always have an easier way than the other. So it might be that you want to turn it upside down. I could perhaps sign at this stage, because then we won't have a runny signature at the end of it. I'm going to show you now, a little bit closer, what we're up against. Okay, and you think to yourself, oh my God, what's going to happen with this? Hopefully it's going to come to life. So this is where, before we start any wet and movement of the ink off the runny pen, I'm going to reserve the white areas. Okay, so I'm going to use wax candle, and I'm going to stroke it along all the areas where I feel would benefit from keeping pure white. Nothing is necessarily pure white, but I think white on a watercolour painting really does add sparkle, and so I use this wax candle such a lot because it's quick. It's quick. The disadvantage is you can't see where you've put it. However, I do like the element of surprise, and so it's nice actually to see all of the patterns being created as you start stroking the paint and the water over it. And I don't worry if it's in the wrong place either. It is, at the end of the day, just a piece of paper, and we're having fun trying, practicing our skills. And that takes me to a top tip, and that is to try and practice your painting and drawing skills for 5 minutes a day. Just 5 minutes. We've all got that time on our hands right now, let's be honest. And so you won't be able to see, but I have indeed created areas where the paint will resist, and so will the pen. The elements of the pen won't touch the wax areas, so I've put it all around his muzzle, little parts in the ears, a little bit in the top of the nose, and so on. Okay, so before we do anything else, I'm going to use just a little bit of water to move things around a little bit. And so I'm touching on the pen all over loosely. I'm trying to hold the brush, can you see, on the end, as opposed to really, really tight in and holding it like a pencil or a pen as we're so used to. If you want to loosen up, that's if you do, is try and hold it on the end and load it with water. This is Clairefontaine block, a CP knot cold press paper, and basically with it being on a block, it means I don't have to gum it to a board. It may cockle slightly, but it will flatten itself out, and there's a little gap in between that I can take off the end picture once it's dry. You have to wait till it's dry so that it's completely flat. That's the disadvantage of a block, because if you've only got one block, you have to wait until the painting is finished to be able to start the next one, but they are ideal if you want to avoid the stretching of the paper. Okay, so just touching in with the water, really, really loose, trying to get some of those tones in. Be confident, don't worry about it. At the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper. If there's anything wrong with it, we can try and rectify. If we start again, we're going to do the same thing again, so there's no point. We might as well try and put right or improve this painting at the end of it, even if we use a different medium at the end to add light touches with pastel. You could use watercolour pencil, you could use acrylic for it to become a mixed media piece. That's what you could do, there's not a problem. We can sort this painting out. I'm going to show you where I'm at now without it running. I can try and get it as close as I can. Can you see how wet that is? If I move it around a little bit so that you can see. Do you understand why I don't work on an easel very often? And that's because I work very, very loose. In fact, one art group that I demonstrated to did say you're the wettest artist we've ever had. Didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that actually. Right, okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to flood all around the background areas. So I'm going to move clean water with the Big Daddy brush in to let the pigment of the pen move outwards. This will form part of the loose background. So I'm going to splosh it all on, look, really, really fast. Let it merge and mingle and create a halo, if you like. This is what I call it, a bit of a halo around it, a really soft part of the background. You see that going mad there? Did you see that? I'll hold it closer and try and show you by moving this water from the outside in. Allows the paint or the pigment to ebb back out. I call it the ebbs and flows. It's probably a little bit random, but there goes. So we've got all that bleed all around the painting. You could include some at the bottom as well. Look, we just splosh it on, and the signature's not touched because that is done with a permanent water resistant micron. Okay, right, so where we're at now, it's really, really messy. So whilst it's messy, let's put a little bit more mess on it. I'm going to, whilst it's wet, put a little bit of background wash on. You can't see it very clearly on this picture, but maybe you can just see indications of blue. Whatever your favourite colour blue is. You could use ultramarine, cerulean, whichever you prefer. We've got some alizarin, crimson, or rose madder is quite a nice pink for you. And to obviously make the pink, we're going to use the white of the paper, the liquid of the water to dilute a strong red pigment to create that pink glow. Okay, so with the colours that I have, I'm using these white night paints. Okay, look at those beautiful colours. All the fancy names in there, but you know the colours, don't you? Red, blue, yellow. They have got some very, very fancy names, some of which I can't even pronounce. So I'm not even going to try. Phthalo blue, that's okay, that's shortened. So using your favourite blue, whichever that may be, I'm going to go for ultramarine today. And I'm going to drop that into the background, into the cleaner areas. Okay, if you want a painting to look clean, try not to load too many colours on top of each other. So I'll drop the blue into the gaps around and about my hair. Now, just putting all of the blue areas in, and then I'm going to move to the pink. So if I just show you close up again. There we go, plenty of blue in there. I'm going to now add a lovely pinky colour. I've got carmine red here. You could use alizarin crimson, you could use rose madder, whichever you prefer. I'm going to drop it into the ears, look. So I'm going to drop a little bit more into the ear, a little bit onto the nose in the gap, obviously. I haven't got much space there, it's very, very black, so put it in the little gap. And then I'm going to use that colour to utilise this painting and actually put areas of light pink, she says. Light pink, okay, it's gone a bit mad, so let's water that down a little bit. Mix in slightly with the blue. You've got purple elements in there, more of a natural mix. People say to me often, Jo, how come you never mix a purple? I let it mix on the paper. I prefer that you've got the blue and you've got the red and they naturally mix together to create the blue separate, red separate, and then the purple merge here and there. So I just think it looks nice and natural rather than contrived and mixed on a palette. Nothing wrong with purple, but I've got little bits of pink, little bits of blue, and with the odd little tiny bit of purple element in there as well. Right, so do we wait until it dries? No, we carry on. So I've got on this one here lots and lots of grayscale, and if you were to work it out from a value of 1 to 6 in the different variations of light, mid, dark, we have about 6. So if that's just a grey hair, brown hair, blue hair, whichever it is, the one colour, whatever one colour it is, it has to have light, mid, dark, and that by which I'm talking white is your first value of a 6 value scale. So if you were to draw a rectangle box and you put segments in of 6, you leave the white one free, that's why we've reserved, and then you would continue to get darker and darker and darker until you reach the heavier, darker, blacky grey. Although with watercolours we like to keep it translucent, so I don't want to go too heavy. It's okay to be heavy in places, but we want a nice mix, a good contrast of the tones. Okay, so in order to get your grey mix, dark brown and dark blue, okay, the best suggestion I normally give is burnt umber and ultramarine, although you may already have a Payne's grey. And I do like Payne's grey, but I do like to add a little bit more blue to it so that it's a little bit more to the bluey side than black. I think black can be quite deadening, although I do use it a lot. I just think in a watercolour, perhaps if you're going to mix it, is try and mix it with the blues and the browns, more natural. Okay, so that I'll do. I will mix this time, so I can use a big brush, and on a plate I'm going to find my burnt umber. In fact, that's indigo. I'm going to keep with that. I'm sure we can manage. Okay, so I'll use the indigo and I'll add a dark brown to it where burnt umber is above. They all look the same until they're quite wet because they're quite dark. But if I was to mix now that is a lovely grey. Okay, we need plenty. How do we get plenty of pigment? Well, we lift plenty without too much water. So if I lift and load plenty of pigment in there, and then I get the brown as well. No need to wash the brush in between. I'm quite messy. No need to wash the brush because it's the same colours going together, so there's absolutely no point, little point. It does get your palettes a bit dirty, but you're not a real artist until you get them really dirty. Okay, so I'm going to show you the mix that I've got. And if you wanted it lighter, you could transfer a little bit of what's on your brush over to the side and then use a little bit of water to dilute that one first and use that. Okay, I will now wash the brush out. And I have 2 pots of water for the very reason of that filthy, dirty water. If I'm using it for grey, that's okay to use dirty water, but then if you're going onto a clean background, you really do need to use your other jar of very, very clean. Okay, so I'm going to move now from the big daddy brush to mummy. Okay, so it's a smaller brush, bit more control, bit less of it going all over the place. It started to dry already, but I'm still working wet on wet. So if it's dried off a little bit, I will re-wet it. If I've talked far too much, which I do, I'll have to re-wet it. But it is actually still quite damp. And I want it to be damp because I want it to bleed a little bit again and create that little bit of a halo on the background. So I'm dropping in the grey in all the areas that I think would work, especially down his head there, look. I've left areas with the wax that's repelling the colour and the tones of this indigo and burnt umber, and we're getting a lovely grayscale coming. Okay, I'm going to re-wet this a little bit here with clean water, that one, so that I can re-drop in the darker bits where I want. Okay, so keep going on the nose a little bit, around the side of his face. Let's wet that as well. That's dried off a little bit, so I'm just wetting it, dragging it down as well. There's nothing worse than seeing a portrait of an animal where it's just the head. He's got no shoulders. He just looks weird. So we do need to give him some shoulders, a little bit of fur, a little bit of bleed here and there, join it all together. So I'm just going to touch in little bits of water again, let that run around out the background. I'll show you close up now where we're at, and we'll go to the next stage. Okay, now you will be able to see perhaps how much this paper is starting to cockle. Even though it's 300 GSM, I do still get quite a cockle because of how much water I use. You could manipulate the water now and get it to bleed and twist and make patterns in your background. Another way to get some patterns in the background, obviously, you could spray some isopropanol in the background, that's the alcohol. You could put sprinkles of rock salt, that will create a lovely effect. You give it time to work as well, don't blast it with a hairdryer and expect that something's going to happen because you're rushing the process, let it go naturally. But for this one, I'm just using the effect of wet into wet. So, get the brush, clean the brush out, put it in the dirty water first, get the clean droplets and drop clean water into the already drying background. So as it's already drying, this will create those beautiful blooms of which some people get so stressed about, but they're so lovely. So leave them alone and let them do what they're going to do and just work with them. Okay, so we're just going to be working now onto some of the details. So I've got gaps in the eyes whereby, yes, all right, the grey and the pen has run, but it's still light enough for me to put in the colour that I've used on the original painting that I did some years ago that I've printed off. So we've got like an orangey colour in there. Now the eyes aren't very dark yet because I've got to build them up slowly. I don't do the eyes first, as lots of people do suggest get the eyes right, everything else falls into place. I rather will put them in the right place, hopefully, but by starting light, if they are in the wrong place, I can actually take an eye out. It has been known. And so we can move that eye across easily because the detail's not there, the heaviness of the paint is not there. Start light, get dark. I like to do all the back elements first, everything wishy-washy, and then build up the layers. Okay, not many layers, very often I go quite fast. And so even with this one now, building up the detail, I don't have to wait for it to dry. I will just drop it into the clean areas. Okay, so with a clean brush, I'm going to get my orange. I've got a golden here, so I'm going to drop that in. And even if it goes on the areas that you were going to do the pupil, that does not matter because the pupil is going to be darker than the orangey colour that you're using. So therefore, when the orange is dry, you can put the pupil on afterwards. Okay, so I'll show you what I've done, and I'll show you that it has actually ran elsewhere. So I don't know how well you can see that, hopefully you can, but I've got a bleed of the orangey colour going into the background as well. Some people may want to lift that out. I personally don't, I leave it, and it's just a natural part of the process of working very, very loose, wet on wet. Okay, so moving to some more detail, I need another mix of the grey, stronger mix, and so again I'll use the indigo because that's what we used. I'll use the burnt umber, but I don't want to use as much water, so I'm not going to add any water to this mix now. It's quite solid if you like, but I'm not going to put it everywhere on the hair, just in places where you see it on the original picture. And so here goes with the next stage, although this is still working wet on wet, so it will bleed lovely and soft, but because I'm on a smaller brush, I've got more control. Also, what has happened whilst I've been talking is it's been drying, okay, so the water has gone, soaked into the paper somewhat, and so I've got more control because it's not as loose as the initial washes. So I'm dropping in the dark pigment into all the areas I think would benefit from this, and we keep going until we're happy, really. That's another thing we get asked a lot as artists. How do you know when you've finished? Oh, very difficult to know, because I could suggest to somebody, right, you need to do this, you need to add that, you need to put that, and then they may think, I've ruined it now, I liked it before. So really, I think it's by your own eye. If you're happy with what you've produced, that is the main part of it. It's not about what other people feel about a painting. It's in your heart of hearts how you feel. Okay, so you go as much as you want to go. And if you're not happy, May I suggest that you leave it for a little while, have a rest, go back to it. You may still not be happy, or you may surprise yourself and you might think actually it's quite nice now it's dried. Don't forget it dries lighter as well. Watercolours dry lighter, and so you know things don't look as shocking once they've calmed down. Now I try not to do too many, whoops, I've just splashed all over the background, but that won't matter because that can be part of the background. But I try and do paintings quite quickly, and that's because at Sable Studio Gallery I have lots and lots of classes weekly, not at the moment obviously, but I have people that come regularly for classes, and I always aim to demonstrate every single lesson. So the topics are a range of topics that I will cover. I don't just do animals, I do buildings, I do figures, I do flowers, I do butterflies, anything and everything, but I do prefer nature. So if you asked me what I'd like to paint, that would be it, but I will demonstrate anything and everything. So in a class, I will demonstrate to the class to inspire them before they start. So if we're on the topic of flowers, I'll start a flower. Sometimes it goes wrong and I have to say, go away, go sit down and do your own, stop looking at mine. And they do as they're told, believe it or not. And then at other times, because you're working fast and you're not really caring so much about what happens, you're just creating, you're just enjoying it, sometimes you produce really good work without thinking about it. So just let yourself go, be free. Okay, now I'm going to be moving to the little rigger now for really fine bits of detail, so I need to really close in on some of the parts now and strengthen some of the areas that you can see. Top of the eyes, top of the head, little parts on the ears, all the really, really darker bits. So whilst that looks quite dark, a lot darker than the other one perhaps, till it dries, this is where lots of people would give in. And they do. I suggest you don't give in. You keep going until you're happy with that painting, and that's all part of the learning process, because if you give in, you've learned nothing. If you tackle it and keep at it, you learn how to rectify the errors. You may not like it at the end, but at least you've achieved something. You've not just put it aside and said, I can't do this. You can do it. It's just that you give up quite easily. A lot of us do. And so I would suggest just keep using that as a practice. Even if you use another medium on it to improve it, you wouldn't say to somebody, oh, well, that went wrong, so I had to do that. You say, oh, look, I've used acrylic, I've used pastel, and here's my lovely hair painting. You wouldn't tell them that it's gone wrong, ideally. I've heard that story before, where an artist, she painted some goats looking through a fence. Two of the goats looked like goats, one of the goats looked like a pig. It's not meant to be a pig. And so she said to a fellow artist, having hung it in an exhibition, she said, I didn't like that one because it went wrong. It's supposed to be a goat, but it looks like a pig. And the other artist suggested to her, never tell anybody that, just leave it to their imagination, whatever they want to see from that painting. If you say, oh, it went wrong, you're negative about it. And she sold that painting to a pig lover. So there you go. And I've never forgot that. So, you know, whilst you think it's, oh, no, it's gone wrong, a lot of people will look at it, see something else. So just go with it. And if your partner keeps saying it's not one of your best, you have to get rid of them. Right then, so on that note, we are just going to make a little bit darker pigment again, just using the fine brush. We've got the rigger, and we're going to go burnt umber again and indigo, but this time only using little touches with this tiny brush. So trying to hit little places now to get some of this detail in. So I'm going to flick some little bits of fur coming off the top of the ears. Flick some little bit of fur coming off that ear as well. Little bits of fur on the inside of the ear. Some of it will merge and mingle with what's wet, but some of it will create nice detailed lines, but not too much. We don't want too much at this stage. Okay. And I might actually, when I dry this, I might actually pause it so you don't have to listen to the noisy hairdryer. A hairdryer blew up on me the other day. I've had a dream about it as well. My mobile phone has blown up on me, so let's hope that doesn't happen. I had a bit of bad luck with hairdryers, so I may be best just to pause it and then get you back on when I've had safe. You know, you won't want to see bits of me flying out the door here at the studio, but still, some of you might. Tough. Okay, doing little bits on the nose, top of the nose, and the little draw of the nose, a little bit down towards the mouth area, flicking some little bits out, and under the eyes here. I'm going to put the pupil in actually. I know it's early doors, but if I just start that and leave, ideally, a little white spot. But all is not lost. If you lose that white spot, you could always use acrylic. I like the FW acrylic ink as well, available at the SAA. You've got the Daler Rowney FW white acrylic liquid ink, which you can apply after it's dried, and so therefore you can get the white bit back. But also, I will often use a blade to scratch bits out, and that again you must do when it's all dry. So I'm just putting little bits of detail in, and then I'm going to carry on with the dark bits around the neck area. Little flicks, look, we've got little flicks going one way, and we've got little flicks going the other way, and like I said, if you can't do it one way as you can the other, is turn the paper upside down, it can help you with that. Okay, so little dark areas up there, and then I'm going to dry it off and then put some pen in, so you won't have to wait 5 minutes, it will just pause and I will be back. So just pausing whilst I dry, I'll be back in a minute.